Hi, everybody. It's Jeff on the line here, and we're going to go ahead and do another one of these videos on language technology and stuff. And today's topic, what I want to talk about, is authoring memory. Okay, now this is like a really cool topic because it goes back a long time, and I'm kind of explaining the history of this. So this is not to kind of like get a 2 minute thing. I want to tell the history of the authoring memory. I want to give the references where it came from and all that because this has just been kind of an underestimated thing, and it should have been done a lot more, but it just wasn't. So I'm going to kind of tell the history of this. So um, it all starts back in about 1998. Okay, in the I was working on controlled language authoring from 1995 onward. Okay, and working at Caterpillar, and we were kind of doing this. So we're working on translation memories, and we needed to kind of handle it on the authoring side. So uh, Greg Gusev and I did some training sessions with the authors, and we were kind of tweaking a translation memory um, tool that we built because we looked at all the translation memory tools at the time. And they couldn't do what we wanted to do. Okay, it wasn't that they weren't doing things; they just weren't doing what we needed to do with the systems the integrations that we needed. Okay, so we made our own translation memory tool, but really it handled authoring on the side too. It's kind of a double thing. Then in about 1998, I found one of the I think it was called TC forums, or Technical Communicators Forum. I found an article written by Daniel Brockman of Trados. Okay, back then it was Trados. Um, that he wrote an article, and at the very end of the article, he mentioned the last paragraph in 1997, December of 1997. I'd have to look at the exact reference here. He mentioned the term authoring memory. Okay, so he used this term. And over that next year, I was really thinking about it. And I was actually beginning to write a lot of articles in different magazines at the time. No longer the geeky kind of conferences and stuff, but it was writing more in business magazines and kind of industry magazines. And in 1999, I wrote I gave a talk at ASLib, which is the translating and the computer. Okay, so it's translating the computer conference. It was ASLib at the time who was sponsoring that. But this, TC is what is number version 21, the 21st year, something here recently in this year, so this past year. So it's been around for a while, or maybe a little bit more than 21, maybe 23. So 1999, I gave a talk in London at the translating for the computer translating the computer. I can't remember. I actually have to look at the actual name of the conference name because it's been so long. Because I got so many of these references. So I have to actually look at the. So 1999, it's called. I'm looking it up here. So it's called Translating and the Computer. So it was already the 21st conference, okay, of Translating and the Computer. In London in November of 1999, and my talk was called "Adapting the Concept of Translation Memory to Authoring Memory." So in that article, the conference talk and our published article, it gave examples of how to do this, okay, of ways to be able to do this, to kind of adapt it to the authoring side only, okay, so I can explain all. Then the next year, I wrote another article in Language International magazine, which no longer is published, but was published by, I think, Harvard University Press, I think, if I remember correctly. And I actually did an article that was called Taking on the Critics. It was called Giving the Machine Equal Time. Okay. And I explained, I was actually critiquing, a person in the psycholinguistics kind of area, but or cognitive science. He just kind of was hitting on controlled language and kind of critiquing it, but he really didn't know the topic, so I did it. But I explained that there actually had been already there. I mentioned the authoring memory topic article, and that was volume number 12, number 3, okay, pages 24 to 25 and pages 44 to 45, and I explained the authoring memory, and I explained a little bit more, okay, at that point in time. Actually, also, when I think about it, we also had 1999. I mentioned, I believe I mentioned at the Society for Automotive Engineering Top Tech in Amsterdam in 1999. I had a graph, and I kind of explained how all the different translation memory and machine translation, all these things kind of worked in a translation workflow. And I believe in that one I mentioned authoring memory. It's kind of there. But I did mention a little bit later, for sure, because the following year in 2000, I also gave a talk with Chris Hogan, my partner in crime, from Carnegie Mellon University. We were really partners in crime. We did a lot of great stuff together. Chris, this was great with a lot of the things we did. So we did a talk called Toward at CLOS, the Controlled Language Applications Workshop. We gave a talk there, a conference talk, and there's a PowerPoint, and there was the published article. It was called Toward the Development of a Post-Editing Module for Machine Translation Raw Output. And that was the third CLAW, C-L-A-W, workshop in 2000 in Seattle, Washington, in April of 2000. And all these are online. You can go download stuff. And in that, I for sure made reference to authoring memory and how it fits into this whole thing of creating, finally at the end of the chain, an automated post-editing module for machine translation. But I mentioned how authoring memory fits into that whole thing, that whole kind of work. Okay, so there were lots of those. Then you got to think here that along the line, I talked about this. So these are kind of the key places. I think at CLAW 2003, I mentioned again, CLAW 2003 in Ireland, Dublin. So what is authoring memory? I mean, I mentioned a few of these references and stuff, and kind of said where it's been already mentioned, because it goes back as far back as 1995 at Caterpillar, where Greg and I did the training, and I gave a report, and we wrote a training class in 1995. So it goes back that far. Okay, but those are published in reports, and but starting in 1990, it was actually being published about it. The article up in 1997, he just mentioned it in a word, in a paragraph. But here in 1990, I was actually describing it and telling all the translation memory people how this would work and how this, how to just do something with it, please. I've got this idea, we got this data, we got to do something with it. And I wasn't working in a computer. I was working at Elda and Elra, kind of do marketing stuff, but I wasn't working, building a system at that point in time in my career. So it wasn't kind of the right place to be doing it. But I could mention it and talk about it. I mentioned it's promoted as an optional kind of an. So how does this work? So controlled language. So it's not over control. I mean, you find authoring memory in normal kind of writing situations and in special writing situations when you're kind of doing revised writing. Okay, where it comes into play is that you've got the original document that you write. Okay, and that original document, let's break it down to sentences. Sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3, sentence 4. Or if you're in a software system, let's call it string 1, string 2, string 3, string 4, string 5. Okay, just a compilation of all these sentences or strings, software strings for menu items or whatever, translatable items that you have in this thing of content, this bucket of content called a deliverable, whatever you want to call it, a deliverable. Okay, and what happens is you're going to start with an original. Let's say it's for English writing, because a lot of this happens in English. It could happen in any language, to tell you the truth. We'll say you have English as a source language, and then you've got deliverable number 1, okay, whatever, topic number 1, or story 1, or whatever this may be, and then you have sentence 1, sentence 2, or string 1, string 2, version 1, because you get a first version of you're working on a draft version or something. Then what happens is you revise it, you edit it, and that makes changes. And what you do with an authoring memory is you Now compare. Now you have a new version, and that's version 2 of this, which it might be, it might be deliverable. Version number 1, it's deliverable 1, but now it's version 2 because you've got a version 2 of it, and now you've got string 1, string 2, string 3. It's version 2. Okay. And then you might do another version of that because you might be editing ongoing. You go through several iterations, and then you have version 3 of this deliverable, and now it's string 1, string 2, and you made changes along the way, and you're comparing these changes as you're going, as you're kind of authoring it. You can track all this. Okay, you can track this in Word. A lot of people do this in Microsoft Word because you get Microsoft Word and different colors and all this kind of stuff. But you can do this in all kinds of version control systems. So it doesn't matter. I mean, a lot of the content management systems can do versioning, okay, so you can track this versioning, but they don't do it sometimes at the very granular level that we're talking, at a very, very detailed or very deep dive at comparing, different sentences at a certain level. And this is what you need to do with authoring memory, because authoring memory, what you want to do is take all these versions of this first document, okay, this first deliverable, and be able to kind of track the changes that are made and what happened in the beginning and what got to the end, okay? You want to keep track of these. Now what happens is, and I'm not going to even talk about translation for the moment, okay? I'm going to say, okay, so let's say we're not even translating. Then the next time the product comes out, or a next deliverable comes out that reuses some of this content, or some of it, or all of it, so maybe the next version of the product comes out, you want to be able to compare. You want to be able to compare the new draft of the version. Now, see, we're talking deliverable 1, version 1, 2, 3, or 4, okay, and then string 1, 2, 3, or 4, or census 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now we're going to talk about, now you have deliverable 2, which might be the next product version, okay. Then you have again draft 1, version 1, and you may be reusing what you started with as the final deliverable of the version 1, the document 1 or the deliverable 1, okay, and now you've got it in deliverable 2, and you might be actually using that final one to become the version 1 of your deliverable 2, or your deliverable. Let's call it deliverable 2. Kind of simplify this. And then you kind of go through this thing again, and you might actually go through less changes because you've already kind of gone through this whole thing of the first document to the first deliverable, okay? And then it can happen again. The next time you go through another 6 months, or you might go through another round of this. And you might merge that products or something, and it might become a new, and it's all trying to go back and trying to track what is the stuff that's been reviewed, and what have you kept, and what do you want to keep for long term. And you want to be able to measure. What you want to be able to do is reuse. This is really helpful in technical documentation. Literature, not so much for obvious reason, because literature is very creative. But this is lots of instruction sets, instruction manuals, user manuals. Like a Caterpillar, we have lots of it because you replace the oil filter, replace the air filter, You're using a lot of partial sentences that have the same wording, fully or partially. Okay. This is all called fuzzy matching in the translation field. You can use the fuzzy matching. You can use the exact matching or fuzzy matching on the authoring side, just on the authoring side if you want to. And I won't even we'll get it. Here you could also get into what's known as in context exact matching, ICE, in context exact matching. And I think it's actually Daniel that was actually in the patent of that. Daniel Brockman already mentioned it a few minutes ago. So all this kind of happens, and then you get the next version, the next deliverable coming out, and you kind of go through this process again. So all this can happen, every 6 months or whatever, 3 months, 6 months, whatever. And now it's kind of, I'll say that for the cloud kind of situation, it's all getting kind of more complicated because you have to do this, in iterations. You have to do this continuous delivery. So there's not like these versions in the same way. And I don't have an outline, so I'm kind of just talking as I go here. Now, what happens when you add translation into this? And this is where it becomes interesting. Now, what Chris and I did, we actually gave a talk also in the year 2000. We gave a talk on, I got to remember here, we gave a talk on the, at LREC, I believe it was, if I remember correctly. We gave a talk at LREC and talking about the LREC is the Language Resource Evaluation Conference, something. It's pretty well known for language resource language. Chris and I, no, it was 1998. We gave the talk in 1998, that one. And that was about expanding lexical coverage. And we were talking about how we were using an algorithm called text bar to be able to filter. And we wanted to create we were talking about example-based machine translation, which is translation memory. And we were talking about how to optimize that in the authoring side to be able to then do translation. And we wanted to be able to filter through what we've already seen before, so we don't retranslate or retranslate. We don't want to kind of work with again what we've already seen before. We only want to translate new things that come through. So that LREC conference talk in 1998 was a pretty important. That fits into the scope. Okay? So now you add the translation in this whole thing. Okay, and what happens is in translation you kind of have. This is where you start doing the matching, the fuzzy matching, the exact matching. There are different levels of matching. They used to call it, they get into now we have, gold matching and plat. I mean, they're all different levels. Kind of the gold's supposed to be best. Now it's called exact matching. So it's kind of, there's all these different levels. There's the whole thing of pricing, how do you deal with it? If you're at the, between the 75 and 80%, 80 and 85% matching, between the 85 and 90% matching, all that. And you kind of have pricing models depending on how much matching you get out of it. So this is the whole translation industry. You know this stuff, okay? And then you got, it's just how much you're leveraging it. Whether that's a good idea or not, I don't want to get into the pricing stuff because that's a whole other discussion. But this is just reality, okay? Of being able to, how much can you use technically? How much content can you reuse? And how much of it has actually been reviewed already, okay? Now, what happens in the authoring memory side is you've got these different versions, right? So you get these different versions of deliverable 1, version 1, then version 2, and then version 3. Okay. Deliverable 1, then version 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you've got document or deliverable 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you get the strings and all that inside these buckets. And what happens is, when do you start the translation process of deliverable 1? This is the big question, folks. This is the really big question that has been hitting. So if you're in a waterfall method, okay, if you're in the waterfall method that you're using, now when you go against Agile, I want to talk about this here because it's important, because it affects the whole way you do things. If you're using waterfall, what happens is you wait until version final, the version N is done, of document deliverable 1, okay? So you got version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, N, whatever that N may be, maybe verse 6 or 10, whatever, okay? You wait for that one to be done before you launch and start the translation of that deliverable 1, okay? Document 1, deliverable 1. You wait for that final version. Then you start the translation process because everything's been finalized, okay? And then you'll know that there won't be any change anymore. Ha ha ha! Right? You're all laughing. When has it ever not changed? This is reality. But let's just say that. Let's say in a theoretical, wonderful, magical world, it's always the final version that's done. Okay. And then what happens is you'll usually get one translation. Now that one translation, okay, is not always one version, because you'll get a draft 1. And usually in the translation process, you have something called translate, edit, proof. So in a full translation cycle, if you're paying really well for some money for this, you're going to go through three versions of this. You're going to go through a translated version that may be done by one translator, then an edited version that may be edited by another translator or the same translator. Okay, I'm not going to get into debate over this. Okay, and then you might have a third version that would go through what's called the stage, which can be comparing that against a style guide and certain things to be able to just kind of a spot check to be able to check all this. Okay, translate, edit. So you might have 3 versions of deliverable 1, and I make a distinction now between deliverable 1 source language and deliverable 1 target language. Okay, because now we're talking about the target language. And in theory, you're going to go through less number of versions on the translation side because you've got a final version of the source English, if it's English. Okay, and then maybe the target language might be Japanese or French. You might want to. Now, remember we had a document level 2, level 3. Okay, so we have to keep that in mind. If we're doing this, then we're going to want to use the final translation, which may be version 3 or 4 of that one. That now may become the reference point for comparing against now the deliverable 2 and its versions in English, which may be less versions. And now we're going to reuse the final version of document deliverable 1 to be able of the translation part to be the first version of the deliverable 2 on the translation side. And then, so you kind of want to reuse as much as you can. Okay, it's all about reuse and leveraging content across multiple versions of multiple deliverables, all that. Okay, so it kind of gets. Now this is all in a waterfall method. Okay, so so I want to say that that's waiting for the final version of the source language to be finished, and then that becomes the reference point for both the translation and for the next deliverable in the future. Okay. Now, what gets into play is when we start mixing this continuous delivery of, now what do you do when everything's gone cloud? Okay, we've all gone completely cloud. There's continuous delivery. There's no more such thing as version branching. Okay, I mean, you don't have a main branch anymore in this. Well, you kind of do, but I mean, it's not like you have this main branch and you're making all these customized things and you're bringing them back in. You're kind of working on the main branch all the time. Okay, I'm trying to simplify this. I'm not trying to get into the details here. And what you're trying to do is you're constantly delivering. You're just constantly delivering. So you may actually be writing and doing things and delivering in 24 hours. You don't have as much time, and it gets more complicated. Here we're talking about maybe about documents. It's more complicated videos. I should do a whole thing on how to do versioning and video content because that's like a whole video in itself. Okay, talk about challenging here. This is great. And subtitling. So I don't know when you get the subtitling here. I should do videos. So now we've got continuous delivery, or what do you want to call this thing? Okay. I don't want to get into the terminology of things because there's lots of buzz terms around this. What happens is you no longer have this concept of having to wait for a final version. It's agile. You got to be working agile mode. This has been a kind of a pain point for the translation localization industry for localization. I call it GILT. Localization, internationalization, language, localization, and translation. This whole industry kind of the whole. We're like everybody's waiting for. Oh no, we don't want this to come. I mean, we already doing this in 2004-ish. Okay, so stuff that has happened. So then what you've got is now you don't wait for the final version of deliverable 1. You're actually starting with maybe version 1 and maybe version 2 of deliverable 1. You start translating at that point. Now this gets kind of hectic, okay? Because you got to do some really careful version control here. Because now you're going to be starting. Let's say that you're going to actually start with the version 1 of deliverable 1 of source language. Version 1. Version 1. And now you're going to start your translation of deliverable 1 target language version, deliverable 1 version 1. And you're making a translation of the first version of the source language in parallel. But then you're already working on the version 2 of it. And you're going to make changes in the translation. So this is kind of agile here. It's kind of stressing, and you got to do a lot of matching and stuff to be able to make these things work, so that they're actually being able to, that you can actually keep track of it. Okay, it's challenging. And then at the end, what you want to do, and the reason we do this is all for sim ship. It's all for simultaneous shipping. It's so that when you get to the end of the final source language version, you're ready to actually deliver also the translation. So you can deliver all your source and target languages at the same time going out, and not wait for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever. Um, so this is this is why this is done this way. Okay. Again, I'm trying to simplify here. So I mean, I could go into more details, but this is not going to be a short video if I continue to do it this way. Because I just want to show how does authoring memory fit into this. So then your authoring memory, which is really important now at this point, when you're doing all this, maybe no longer waterfall, but actually agile, you need to be able to leverage not only the document. Maybe I should talk about, I need to distinguish deliverables and documents now too, because you might have a set of deliverables. You might have one deliverable with a set of documents inside the deliverable. Okay, or there are different ways to do this. I mean, this is all, everybody's kind of doing this slightly differently. But you might have, a set of manuals. You might have an installation manual and a user manual and a configuration guide and a system admin guide. You might have actually all these different guides that are all talking about the same product. And you're using the same terminology and stuff, and maybe using some sentences and stuff across them because you're trying to use that. You're using authoring memory. Okay, you might be partial, might be full, whatever. So you want to reuse that because you don't want to be writing all these sentences all the time, all over again. You're really trying to make it so that you could use it actually. If you had a real-time kind of authoring system that actually allowed you to do authoring assistance while you're authoring the manual, you would actually have this all built in. So when you're writing another guide of a different type but for the same product, you could actually be doing, like for the user guide, you might be writing an install guide at the end, or maybe admin guide or configuration guide, or what do you want to call these things? And you might be writing them in parallel or at different times, but what you want to do is like Google, when you start searching Google, and start suggesting the parts of things. You want to have that. I mean, this is like the goal, folks. This is the goal. Open text, if you don't have it. And so what you want to do, or I think even I heard multi-coder can actually do this too. So what's important here is that you would be able to benefit from it while you're authoring. You don't have to do, your brain doesn't have to do all the inventing of all the sentences all the time. You're reusing things that you've already written before, and then you're kind of reusing it, and then you're modifying it and stuff. And so that's the whole concept of authoring memory, whether or not you're doing it in a waterfall approach, whether or not you're doing it in an agile approach, continuous delivery approach. Called continuous delivery because agile, you can do agile without doing continuous delivery. You can do agile with waterfall too. The approach-wise for translation. So this is kind of the authoring part. So this is what I kind of want to get into here. It's just I want to kind of explain that. So all this has been explained in different bits and pieces. So I've already mentioned the 1999 article, the published stuff. It's 1990 article, Translating the Computer. Then I talked about it again in Language International 2000. Okay. And then Chris and I talked about Ed Claw 2000. He and I also mentioned the LREC paper in 1998 about this. Then I wrote more about this. You can get bits and pieces of this out of the Multilingual Computing and Technology. It's not called Multilingual Magazine. It's called Multilingual Computing and Technology back then. That was an issue, let's see, that was number 51, volume 13, issue 7, in the October-November issue of 2002, pages 40 to 45. Okay, so it's already there. Then I also kind of mentioned this again also in the CLAW 2003 in a panel session where I was one of the panelists. I gave a thing about the integration of controlled language and machine translation. And then that was in the middle of May, 2003. So there's kind of been different places where this has been presented before. And then some final references you want to kind of look up to, where I've been mentioning these different approaches. And this is just me, okay? But I think I was, kind of in the early stages of all this. Then in 2004, I made a Kathleen Bart of Airbus, and I made a conference talk. We did a co-authored and co-presented a conference talk at the Society for Technical Communication in Paris in April 2004. And then And then we actually gave two different talks. She and I gave a co-authored talk there, and then co-presenting co-authored. And I gave another talk just on um, multilingual control languages at the same conference that one I just mentioned, Society for Technical Communication in Paris, 2004 April. And then I gave another conference talk on the same month, but later, or the next month, actually in May, in Besançon, France, at a special invited talk at a conference talk there. I called it, what did we call this? We called How of Meeting the Needs of Industry and Business Users in Telecommunications, and Other Fields with Controlled Language and Machine Translation. So there have been lots of papers about this, covering different pieces of it, going back, published as far as 1999, but actually the term was coined in 1997 by Daniel Brockman in that TC forum. And then we actually covered it in internal papers back at Caterpillar's back in 1995. So all this has been kind of covered, so there's no doubt where if we call this, we call it intellectual property. I mean, it's already out there now. There have been different features over the years we've seen come out in different products. So we've seen Sagen contacted me in the mid 2000s. They were doing things. SDL and has had different content management system products, and everybody's been kind of trying to do this. And others. I mean, you can see this in Acrolinks. You see it in Acrolinks you can see it in the Breve with translation transperfect, with lots of different things, and that's the whole list. I give the whole list of them in that. There's STC talks and the one at Besançon, France. So this, the 2004 talk things I was aware of that were kind of trying to aim at this. Now we get companies like Congree and stuff that they're all kind of trying to do this thing, this authoring memory thing, trying to balance it or kind of piggyback off the whole translation memory thing, trying to piggyback and create an authoring memory solution. And this is like I was in 1999. That's just come on, folks, do it just for it. And people have done it. But now you have features, you can find them. Just look up for authoring memory. But it all points back to the earlier stuff. It all was they were all kind of follow-ups from those early papers. Now, what's sad to say, and all sad to say, people didn't cite me. I cited Daniel, so I gave credit to Daniel in my 1999 paper. I said where I got it from. Not everybody's been crediting, me for having the 1999 talk. A lot of people just kind of used it and didn't credit it. That's not cool, but it's okay. I'm not going to make a big deal about it. But from now on, folks, you want to give credit where credit's due, okay? So I'm crediting where people have done it. I mentioned the tools where it's been done. Let's all do the same thing. It's kind of good for the industry, good for all of us, so it's all that. But I want to make sure none of you don't try to do a patent on it. It won't work. It's already covered. So this has been really covered. So we covered our bases here. So but do something well. Do things you're doing that. Just always make sure that when you're creating things, make sure that give the acknowledgments where it is. It kind of helps. If you're talking about it at papers, don't go into a new conference and don't mention what's already been done, because that's going to look you really bad, especially this video talking about it right now. So it's just trying to make sure that we're building upon things, building upon already built, already doing what's already done here. So and don't reinvent wheels, and don't come out with some company saying, hey, we're doing something new. It's not new, folks. Not new. Okay? There might be kind of some new things you can do, but hey, it's already going to be covered in a lot of different places. So, but at least in the tools, you see all these tools that we're talking about, they're all kind of attempting to do the same thing in the same way, just slightly different. The whole in-context matching, that's a little bit more deep, because you're actually do comparative. You're actually kind of playing with the authoring memory and the translation memory to actually recognize entire paragraphs and not just sentences. So, it kind of gets a little bit more stuff. So I've already gone for 35 minutes. I really appreciate your time. Appreciate your time to kind of listen to this. And I want to kind of give the history of it, because this has never been really discussed very well. It has, and all these little pieces, things all over the place, but never in kind of one spot. So I just kind of want to get that out and make sure that everybody's aware of that. And you need to go read those papers. Go read what the others have been doing. And I was citing the people's in my one in Language International. Bam! I think in that paper, which was rebuttal, was a rebuttal to Hofstadter. Um, I must have had I had nearly a full page of references in my hand. Okay, I just like blasted him with references of things that had to be done. So I cited so many things, and it was a business magazine article. I cited those references. Looked like some some article at a conference or stuff. But I want to make clear that this has already been done before. And I was saying to him, what you're saying is completely off base because it's already been done here, and here, and here, and here, and there, and there, all that. So when you go do this, read all these places and see what is referencing back again, okay? And even some of these, I think, even reference Darn. I'm thinking now, it probably goes back to my doctoral thesis stuff. I mean, come on. So there's all kinds of stuff that keeps referencing back to all places. So give credit, or at least when you talk about it, do it. Give credit, especially if you're publishing about it. And you publish what you're doing. Talk about what others are done, because that just makes you look more credible to tell you the truth. So and doesn't make you look like some newbie on the block, because there are a lot of this new kid on the block kind of stuff. It's like, oh God, we've already been through this before. Didn't you read that before or see that before? Present of this before? And I'll say I'll kind of finish this by saying a few weeks back, Daniel Brockman, okay, the Trados guy who now it's been required by acquired by SDL at a point in time. I can't remember the exact year. And then it was acquired by RWS this past year. I sent him a message a few weeks back in 2021, the end of the year. I said, hey, Daniel, guess what? A quarter of a century later, I'm still talking about authoring memory to my colleagues. And he laughed, because it's still true. This is still valid. It's still relevant. It's still pertinent. And it's not old hat, okay? And it's still being questioned today. What is this? What's this thing called authoring memory, folks? This is what it's called. It's called authoring memory. And it doesn't matter the system platform, okay? Now, we can give it, people kind of tweak and call it content leveraging and stuff, but it's authoring memory. Authoring memory is actually a more sexy, actually a term, because that's what Trados did. Trados called it translation memory. Actually, maybe IBM actually had TM, because they call it TM2. So they were a little bit earlier. They're kind of competing at the same time. But authoring memory just sounds cooler than content leveraging. It sounds like some deep term, So it just sounds easier to remember. And memory bases and all the database stuff. This is easier to understand. It's more user friendly. But no matter what you call it, it's this thing. Okay, it's this concept. And go check out the articles. Go read them. I've kind of mentioned all the places you can find them. I got a long list of publications. You can kind of find mine. You can go download them. You can find the other ones that are in there that I've just talked about. My links are working. I have had to take a long time. The other ones, the links may be broken because I'm not taking care of other people's published articles. So that's what it is. And I encourage you to go ahead and take a look and read about it and do the best with it. Just do a great job with what's out there and build upon it. Thank you very much.